right. People are starting to file in here. Very excited. Okay, hey, while we're waiting for people to file in and get in, I want to know where people are from. So if you want to go into the chat and share where you are from, let's see who we've got with us today. Let me open the chat here, and all right, we got Oakland, Tennessee. Tennessee, more and more SaaS companies keep springing up in Tennessee. Pretty exciting, actually. Salt Lake City, Utah, definitely a lot of SaaS growth over there. All right, LA, San Diego, a lot of California. We got Pennsylvania. Okay, all right, so we're doing really quick intros of where you're from, where you're tuning in from. And let's get rolling. So I'm Sam Nelson. I'm an SDR leader at Outreach and very excited to do this very special webinar sponsored by LinkedIn. We're going to be talking about putting the buyer first and having more meaningful conversations. I'm happy to be here in good company with people throughout the sales org. When we talk about sales, the touch points that happen in movies are really just a handful of essential work we do taking care of customers as they move from cold leads to repeat customers. And our jobs are difficult because while we want to make people happy, including our bosses and colleagues, there's one major problem that we're here to talk about today, and that is wasting time. So, number one problem for salespeople is wasting time. Number one problem for customers is also wasting time. So really we have the same problem, but we're coming at it from different perspectives. It's like the story of two lovers who can't quite meet in a rom-com. So we're going to talk about how we get sales orgs and customers together with the right timing and right context. One more get to know you question. What is your favorite romantic comedy? I'll share mine right now. It's Dumb and Dumber. Okay, so you can't take that one. Let's see in the comments what everyone's favorite romantic comedy is. Right. Okay. So I have two guests with me today, two rock stars, to talk about how we can sync with customers and build stronger team collaboration and earn trust. We'll talk about some tips, tricks, and tools that can help us along. So we have Natasha, who is the founder of Surge Digital. She's worked with over 1,600 people on their B2B lead strategy on LinkedIn. She's a very sought after consultant in that space. We also have Tina, who is a senior product marketing manager over at LinkedIn. And so we have kind of this cool opportunity where if you want to ask questions to Natasha, you can go ahead and do that in the comments. And we're going to do a Q&A session at the end. If you've ever had a question you would like to ask a marketing leader on LinkedIn, now's your chance. So go ahead and put those in the comments, and we are going to do that later in the webinar. Let's kick it off. Okay, so number one, I want to start with Tina. So Tina, you work for LinkedIn, which started out as a networking platform and has now expanded into multiple marketing tools and sales tools, and including an outreach integration, which I love and I'm very familiar with. So we know LinkedIn is a great place for getting a job and looking for people. And for a lot of people in sales, it's actually like a pretty common like social media platform. I use it more than any other social media platform as a salesperson, as far as time spent. But how can it help us with team collaboration and help us work better? I'd love to kind of hear it from you, Tina.
Yeah, sure. So making connections and building relationships is really at the heart of everything that we do at LinkedIn. And LinkedIn Sales Navigator is a great platform for getting you and your team to work smarter and build those critical relationships needed to ultimately close more deals fast. And so one of the best ways to work smarter is to collaborate with your team and your colleagues. And we do this by letting users find, research, communicate to prospects and buyers, helping users understand their buyers better by surfacing critical insights from various sources. But one source could be the people you work with, your team. And so Sales Navigator shares connections with your prospects. And what better way to start a conversation and relationship with a warm introduction from your teammate? In fact, buyers are 5 times more likely to engage when they've been introduced to a salesperson in advance. And in fact, 73% of execs actually prefer to work with a salesperson who they've been referred to by someone they know. And so we know that by collaborating with your team and making these connections from your team is a great avenue to explore. And it's not just who you reach out to is important, it's how you reach out as well. And that's where I think Outreach really does a great job at this. Together, we really help salespeople connect with people authentically and not just spamming everyone, especially with the right message, the right person. You can really build those meaningful relationships and powerful relationships without even disrupting your sales workflow. So really improving your day-to-day efficiency and again, helping you and your team work smarter.
Love it. And I can really attest to um, what Tina said about kind of getting introduced to someone and how that increases it by 5x. I mean, our experience, so outreach to sequences, our highest performing sequence ever of all time is called this referral sequence, where
Yeah.
we will actually like reach out to someone through a referral, and our reply rate on it is like 54%, which may be like a 10x improvement to like
Yeah.
cold outbound. And so it's really cool. And LinkedIn does a very good job of making that easy to do. So, okay, let's go to Natasha. So, Natasha, founder of SurgeFlow Digital. You're founder of SurgeFlow Digital. You're a consultant, so you kind of have had a good inside look at how working remotely has taken a toll on customers, sales teams, companies. So, what are you seeing out there right now? So, two questions. What are you seeing out there right now? And then what would you say is the most important thing we can do to help solve for the disconnects and challenges that we're facing by being remote for so long?
Yeah, so in terms of what I'm seeing out there at the moment, it has changed and it has progressed in different ways since this all started with COVID. Like it's gone so quickly, but from March, the initial thing I saw was fear and I guess confusion. Things changed very rapidly. Some organizations, some teams are used to being digital and remote. So, like for example, like me, I always work from home, so nothing's really changed that much. However, if we look at teams that tend to be able to collaborate in person, so like sales, marketing teams, they can communicate and be around each other in person, have those meaningful in-human conversations. That being taken away from them and then having to figure out how they can still have that connection online has been a learning curve. Some have adopted it incredibly well, and it's actually helped accelerate their sales efforts online. However, in terms of like the second part of your question, so what can we do to solve the disconnects to overcome this challenge of being remote and having to adapt? What I've kind of been telling clients and what they have told me has worked the best for them is communication and alignment, either within their direct team that they're working with or across different teams. So for example, between sales and marketing, communication, if you're doing like an ABM strategy, super important. Making sure that you have those check-ins, whether it's daily, weekly, individual, or as a team, to make sure that you're aware, what are you currently working towards, what's working well, and can you track those needle moving activities through the funnel to make sure that as leads are going through your process and your system, nothing's getting lost in the tracks because it's all virtual. So yeah, that's what I would say I've seen so far.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely connection, understanding in virtual spaces, and eventually in person again. I'm hoping. I'm a big in-person guy. In-person are going to be central to being successful. So you've both mentioned tools and outreach. So I can just say, I mean, I'm biased because I'm from outreach, but outreach is obviously very important, at least that way of reaching out to people, through a sales engagement platform. But we're all doing it. What can some people do differently? And let's start with, let's go with Natasha again.
In terms of what people can do differently with outreach, I'm not sure if this is exactly what you're asking, but a couple things that I've been doing and what I've been doing with sales reps individually, which has helped them in terms of how to manage all this stuff that is virtual, not in person, is really little changes that you can make when you're having sales calls, for example. So a lot of people might just do audio. Try switching on your video. Like we spoke about this in LinkedIn Spark event as well. That was a big thing, making sure that you have that face-to-face contact, you can see body language, that's something small that you can do. Second thing is the background that you have, like having personal things in the background or something where it looks like you're more approachable is also another thing that you can do. Does that answer your question, or are you going after like a different tangent?
Yes, and actually, that's good feedback for me. I have like this fake like brick background that makes me look
as I was saying that, I was like,
and it's actually really true. I mean, I don't like to distract from my hair, but
no,
I think
your
that's
hat
a
is
really
a
good thing.
talking
Because I mean, if you put like I'm an adult fan of Legos.
No way. What's your favorite like
Built-in
Lego?
Legos. They have things in the background that just kind of give that personal touch. And so I think that's really good. That's a really good thing. And then of course, cameras on. I mean, that face to face is a big deal. So thanks for that, Natasha. And Pina, what
Yeah.
would you say?
I think ways that teams can really stand out. I mean, it sounds pretty, I guess, cliche, but I think first, like, I think there's three things to really help stand out, especially in a virtual setting now, is again, using those warm introductions and really leveraging your network to kind of make those connection points and really get those introductions are critical, especially since they're from people you know and they're already warm already. And so just makes sense to leverage who you know, especially in this virtual environment. The second is, think about the timing. So when you know who you want to talk to, you have this great, moment of reach out. You really want to think about when you want to reach out. And I think now is the time where timing is everything. So let's say a company is hiring greatly in the finance department. Well, most likely they're going to need a finance solution. So that might be a good time to reach out if you have a financial solution offering. And that might be a great time to kind of make that next step. And then third, when you have who you want to talk to and then when, what do you want to say? And so you want to think about your content, and there's multiple channels that you can also leverage to kind of get that message out. And as we all move towards a virtual setting and have a digital presence, these online channels aren't a bad place to start. And I think that's where Outreach and Sales Navigator can really help, especially tracking all those channels and activities in one place so you never have to leave your workflow.
Love it. Hey, okay, one tactical thing that I thought of while you were talking is, like, obviously, like, if there's an executive that's connected to a prospect that you want to work with, that's very, very powerful. But a
Mhm.
common problem I'm sure a lot of SDRs have run into is if you reach out to that executive, that is often not super high on their priority list. So my hack for that, what I'll do is when you find that you have a prospect that is connected to an executive, someone high up that can recommend you, write what you would like them to say for them. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, they're going to put it into their own words, but if you write it for them, you can presuppose all of the context they need. So it eliminates all the back and forth necessary. So you can just make it a 2-minute project for an exec. And the difference between a 2-minute project and a 10-minute project is probably the difference between it happening and not. So
Yeah.
if an SDR ever reaches out to me for a recommendation and they give me an example of what they want me to write, I'll put it in my own words, but I can pretty much always do it. So just like a little tip, this works super well. And that's one way that you can do it to make sure that, well, give it a much higher chance of happening, especially if they're a busy exec.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And that's definitely something that we also recommend as a best practice. And it goes back to your original point of just, wasted time, and this will save them time. So that's a perfect little tip that could definitely be leveraged here.
Cool. Okay, so question for both of you. We all know people need things. It's pretty simple. There are prospects and customers and even ourselves who can feel a little bit overwhelmed at the same time, right? We're balancing a lot of priorities. So what would your advice be for breaking through the noise and making more meaningful connections that lead to conversions and not just friendly conversation? So actually, Tina?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And as you all know, virtual selling is here to stay. And even before the pandemic started, we knew that at LinkedIn, we knew that having a sales model that embraces this new reality isn't just like nice to have, it's more like a need to have. And there's this huge trust gap that exists between buyers who don't feel like they're being heard and that salespeople aren't really on their side. And we also heard from months while we're developing this approach where we feel that we felt like this approach really wanted to give the buyers more control and really treat them like modern consumers that they are, and equip sellers with the abilities to be more trusted advisors. And we call this approach the buyer first selling. It's a very impactful way to invest in relationships in the long term and will hopefully make you stand out in the crowd.
Love it. Okay, and then Natasha.
Yeah, so in terms of buyer first, need for personalization, when I first started LinkedIn, I remember, like, it's embarrassing to admit it now, but the way that I would reach out was this like long sales pitch, and it worked for some reason, just because it wasn't as saturated at that point. When I look back at that now, if I try to apply that strategy to reaching out to the modern buyer, the sophisticated buyer, it wouldn't work. They'd block me. They'd block me, they'd unfollow me, they wouldn't speak to me. And the way that that's shifted is like personalization. The word personal is inside that. People want to be seen, heard, and understood as an individual, not as something that you want to get money out of. So, and people can tell. They can tell by how you speak to them. They can tell if it's a cookie cutter template or you're using an automation tool. Tech can be so powerful. I know we'll go into this later, but it shouldn't be used to replace human engagement and interaction. And when it comes to reaching out, you've got to put yourself into the shoes of the buyer and think, what do they want right now? Because a lot of the time, what people want isn't what they necessarily need. And as a seller, usually you would automatically go in with the needs of a client. You would think, well, I know this is what they need because I understand my product, I understand this industry, this is what they need. However, if you go into the seller's shoes, that might be not in alignment. They might think completely different things because that's their surface level pain point, not necessarily the solution because they've not got to that place yet. So when I think about reaching out and how to cut through the noise and establish a meaningful connection, I will think, okay, I'm going to assume that I don't know anything about this prospect yet. Like I can take the data that I've had from other sales conversations, typical limiting beliefs and like common objections that might come up, but I'm going to ask those questions and I'm going to stay open and curious and I'm going to see how they feel. What do you think your problems are? What kind of solution are you looking for right now? If I can align with that and help you, I will. And if not, I'll point you in the right direction of somebody else who can, because it's only going to be mutually beneficial for us to work together if I can help you and you're going to be benefiting from it. If not, then it's better for you to go somewhere else. I save my time. You keep your trust in SDRs. So that's kind of my overview approach. I don't want to ramble on because I could talk about this for hours and bore you all with it, but that's kind of my approach to it.
Okay, that's awesome. And okay, so one random question, Natasha. I'm just curious at your perspective on it.
Yeah.
So like, have you ever used the LinkedIn like voice message thing on LinkedIn, or do you have any opinion on that?
Yeah, so I've gone through this, like, I guess, journey of progression as to how inventive I can be when I'm reaching out to people. I think with text, like, people are getting smart, and there's so many sellers right now. There's also a lot of buyers, but it gets really crowded, and it's more and more difficult to be original. So the different ways in which I've kind of tested outreach, and I'm very data driven, so I like to split test things because a lot of the time I know my opinion is probably based on like cognitive bias. It's like what I think is going to work. But if I look at the stats, sometimes that's different. I've tried voice notes and also Loom. So like, you can use it to record videos, like show your screen, or you can show your face as well. So Loom is a really good tool. I've done both. Voice notes have worked better with certain, it depends on the industry. Like I've split tested it across industries. Voice notes have worked really well for me when I'm speaking to people in the recruitment space. So some of our clients are like, we reach out to recruitment, like headhunters, stuff like that. Yeah. They're so busy, but they live on LinkedIn. So I know that they're not probably going to click on a video link and go and watch it. However, when it's just press play and they can see it's 60 seconds, it's like a 1 minute long voice note, they're going to do that. Same with like if I'm reaching out to someone in sales, they want to talk. And when they can hear me speaking, it's almost more trust because it's not just a LinkedIn profile to who I am as a character. They can hear how I'm speaking, if I'm smiling, if I'm laughing, if I'm friendly and approachable. You can send that energy through like a voice note much better than text. So I'm a big advocate of voice notes. Like if you haven't tried it yet, try it and just track the numbers and compare it to text and see how it works.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I haven't invested a lot of energy into it, but I know that I get those sometimes, and it's orders of magnitude like more personal or intimate than like a text message. It's pretty amazing. I don't know, like you have to figure out workflows and make sure you're doing that efficiently, but I think it's a very cool feature. So thanks for weighing in on that. I was curious what you thought. Okay, so as an SDR, so I'm very lucky. That outreach was, I mean, we're an outbound first company. We sell a tool that's very popular among SDRs. Outreach treats SDRs very, very well. We think very highly of ourselves, probably too highly of ourselves, right? So, but that's not the case in every organization. Like in some organizations, the SDRs will feel like the wizard behind the curtain, where they make a lot of magic, but feel kind of underseen. So I want to get some of both of you, kind of some of your thoughts on what you can do to encourage stronger collaboration among organizations and teams. Let's go with Tina first.
Sure. Yeah, so I think building relationships with buyers is ultimately what we all want to do, but it's also important to build those relationships internally. So whether you're in marketing, an SDR, or an AE, forming that relationship across the board really helps build trust and ultimately respect for one another. And I think there's this level of transparency that needs to happen amongst all the teams as well to understand, what are your goals, what are my goals, and where can we meet so that we're aligned. And so I think by having those conversations and meetings, building that trust and building that mutual respect for one another, having that transparency as to where you're at with your goals, I think will ultimately will enable stronger collaboration and hopefully respect for one another as well.
Tina, what are your thoughts?
So to add on to that, because I agree with everything that Tina said, I think I touched on this briefly in the first question. But in terms of stronger collaboration, enablement between teams, I think it is communication. Like it sounds cliche, but it comes down to like communicating between teams, whether it's internally with the people that you're directly working with or across the organization. It depends on the size of the organization. If we're looking at like enterprise level, you might have multiple different teams that are in charge of different parts of the funnel and the sales process. So as a leader's passed through, if these people are focusing on different things, it's going to drop off at some point, or you're going to end up kind of losing potential like vital information that could have helped you close a deal or shorten the sales cycle or process. For me, what I think is important is within the teams, like they need to sit down and discuss, okay, what's working? So what is important for us to do within the marketing team or within the sales team? What things are working well for us right now? What's important for us to focus on? Making sure that everybody's in alignment and aware of what those things look like, and then track the numbers so that each part of the sales process, people can see, okay, this is working, awesome. Why don't we split test it? Do like an A/B test with our outreach methods. So it doesn't matter whether it's organic or paid, same process. This is what I do with when I personalize outreach. I'll do like one set of templates for connection request message. Then I'll do another set for follow-up, or what if that response is negative or neutral or positive? How am I responding? What does that decision tree look like? It's the same as you go further down the process. If you've got a landing page or you have a demo call, what is that demo call laid out like? Like, how is that working? What's your follow-up process? And split test that within each part of the funnel. And then you can start to optimize. And you can start to remove the things that aren't working and double down on the things that are. And then you can elevate the entire organization based on facts and figures, not just assumptions.
Awesome.
Yeah, I love that. And something to add on what Natasha just mentioned, I think there's this notion of just over communicating doesn't hurt when you're in talking with each other. And I think that builds not just trust, but it looks, the AEs and the SDRs definitely are seen more as partners in that sense, especially when they're over communicating and in constant communication.
Love it. Well, one interesting trend that I've noticed, just like in my own personal experiences, back in the day, SDRs and AEs used to be aligned one-on-one. And that was really important because in order to communicate everything about the accounts that you were both working, you just needed to meet regularly and you had that relationship. Now, like with sales engagement, like with Outreach as an example of sales engagement platforms, SDRs and AEs can be on the same page all the time without ever having to really talk. And for that reason, now SDRs are not typically paired one-to-one. They're paired like 10 SDRs to 10 AEs. And so that one-on-one communication and relationship, it's still kind of there, but it's not nearly as strong as it used to be. And so I think making time for that, even if it's not urgent like it used to be, I think it's really important. And it's good in so many different ways. And so something to definitely work in there if you feel like you're never communicating between SDR and AE on your team. Great. Okay. All right. So Tina, you mentioned being buyer first earlier. I want to kind of go back to that. So it seems like a very intuitive approach to making people happy, but we also need to make sure that we turn prospects into customers, right? So do you want to go maybe into a little more detail about what being buyer first means from your perspective?
Yeah, so to me, being buyer first simply means that you're putting the buyer's needs first. And so the buyer first approach at LinkedIn really consists of 5 different principles. So the first one is learn, then define. So all buyers have really unique situations, and sellers can really take the time to understand those. And so by doing so, sellers can then use their own expertise to help define a solution and a buying process that works for both the buyers and the sellers. And then the second principle is really to share readily, and that just means buyers are already searching online for specific solutions, information, and insights, and so they most likely already know a little bit about you and what they're looking for. So it helps buyers if sellers just share freely, share information that will help them make a decision, showing that you're an expert and adding value at every step. Without any hidden agenda. And I think Natasha gave this great example of how if the buyer asks her for some advice, she's going to readily just share that, even if it means, that they might not purchase or whatever, or what have you, because it's an investment for the long term. The third principle is really to solve, don't sell. So really, this really focuses on becoming a trusted advisor, and it starts by truly listening to your buyers' specific challenges and crafting a solution that meets their needs versus a cookie cutter solution that might not fit their needs, and you're just trying to peddle something. Um, and then the fourth principle is deliver value, which is, when you deliver value, it doesn't stop when the sale ends and when it's done. Of course, before the sale, you're providing things like trials and trainings and test runs, but really staying engaged when the sale is done to make sure that the customer is happy. And then the last final principle is really to earn trust. And so throughout the sales process, always act in your buyer's best interest by investing in the long term, as Natasha had mentioned and gave a great example of this, even if it means short-term sacrifices. And so a great example of this internally here at LinkedIn is we get asked a lot by our customers about what a great sales tech stack looks like. And we happily provide the information and advice and expertise as much as we can, even if a customer doesn't have any intention of buying Sales Navigator. It's something that we want to provide at least as an added benefit.
Okay, so a follow-up question. So I think we can understand why being buyer first feels good to the customer. But what's the value of being buyer first to you personally, and why does it matter so much today? And let's start with Natasha for this one.
So what it means to me is, I think Tina completely, like, she covered everything perfectly. A couple of things that I can add onto that from like my experience, the things that I've learned that I maybe didn't understand at the start, and if I had done, it would have accelerated my journey like 10x, is people seem to have this limiting belief where if you share information before you get somebody to like commit to you, whether it's financially or with time on a sales call, that they're not going to pay you further down the line, that they're going to take that information, they're going to run away. And that's one of the buyer first principles, like sharing readily. I've noticed that the more I share, like the more value I share, the more customers come to me. And I do the same vice versa. When I invest into somebody else, like I bought into this like high ticket sales program last year, he has free content everywhere. I probably didn't need to spend that much money. I could have figured it out myself from his free content. However, the value in that was, okay, well, his stuff's so good. He's already solved part of my problem. I now trust him because I've consumed all of this content. I'm now like tied into his style of work and like his resources, his teachings. I want to know what else he could do. Because if he can do all of that for free, imagine what a paid product would look like. And it's the same kind of principle for being buyer first. Second point is the act of reciprocity. Instead of like, and this was, I think it was a principle, you can correct me, Tina, but it was about sharing, not selling. So like you approach someone, you share value with them instead of going in sales like head first. For me, and a lot of people trip up on this as well, like a lot of clients, or I get this question a lot where they say, okay, well, it's great to have a good conversation, but how can I convert that into a sales conversation? Because you can be like friends with somebody, but then how do you like change the frame of that talk to make sure that you can kind of convert them and move them down the pipeline? It's always like, it's giving first. So I lead with value. I try and give them something to solve part of their problem. If they never come back to me, like, it's not the end of the world. There's hundreds of thousands of people to reach out to. There's way more prospects on LinkedIn. So if you lose that one person, it shouldn't matter, because you should have a good strategy in place to fill that pipeline up with other people who are the right prospects, and it is going to be the right time when you reach out to them. So yeah, for me, buy first, everything that Tina said exactly. And then also removing that limiting belief of that sharing is a bad thing. You can't overshare, like give as much value as possible. That will only build trust. And active reciprocity. If you give to somebody, their natural instinct is to give back to you. And it works for me. Like, I'll give somebody something and they then think, okay, well, she's given me this, I feel like I should give her some of my time. So I'll jump on like a 15-minute like exploration call with them and then see if it's a good fit.
Love it. Thanks so much for that. Okay. And then Tina, I'd love to hear your perspective as well.
Yeah, no, I think Natasha did a wonderful job in summarizing and providing a really great example of what it means to be buyer first. And I think the value of buyer first is that it's truly a win-win for everyone involved. A buyer gets a partner who they can rely on and trust throughout the sales process and beyond. And a seller gets a buyer who will most likely continue to work with them for the long haul. So you have very few chances to make a good impression. And I think by making that really first good impression, by investing in a solid, mutually respectful relationship, it'll pay off in spades for everyone, especially today when it's a little difficult to build those relationships and remotely. So yeah, I think it's key to kind of be buyers first in this environment, especially.
So we've got the soft skills down. We can all ramp up our game, be more conscientious of the customer's point of view, build trust. Data and tools can help that along too. So what is the most important technology, or what are the most important technology moves that you think people can make to strengthen their sales orgs? And for those that have data insight tools and automation, what do you think they can do better? Natasha, let's go first with you.
Awesome. A couple things around this. So in terms of important technology moves, it depends on what your goal is. Like, it depends on what your goal is. It depends what issues you're currently facing that could be made easier through switching out maybe like another process that you have with tech or automation. How I approach it and how my clients approach it is they do everything like manually first, just to track how things work. Then if they need, for example, something like AC, like Active Campaign for email automation, or they want to use Sales Navigator to identify prospects and take lead generation seriously, they'll implement that once they've chosen that LinkedIn is the right platform for them, for example. In terms of automation, data insight tools, automation, I think like it can be extremely powerful and an incredible thing to use, as long as you don't use it from a place of just being lazy and wanting to switch out putting in the effort to actually fully understand and do the research of a potential prospect. That being said, it's a fine line between volume and quality, and what is that bliss point where you can reach more people and spread your message without compromising on the quality of the message and the prospects that you're going to be attracting through your marketing efforts and campaigns. Do you want like specific technologies that I use as examples?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Cool. So what I do personally, and this is how I actually do it with a lot of clients as well, LinkedIn's like one part of an entire marketing process. I don't know if we'll speak more about like multi-channel marketing down the line, but I used to think, okay, just within LinkedIn, how can I source leads, generate leads, close leads on LinkedIn? That can work really well, and it works really well for some companies and for some organizations. However, with trust going down and competition going up, especially over the past 12 months, what I've found to be more effective and what I've seen as a change is that people need more touch points to have trust and to buy something than they used to, because there's more options and people have the choice where they can just sit in the back and be like a ghost follower or a ghost prospect, where they're not going to interact with you. They're just going to shop around. They're just going to watch, see what you're doing, see if other people are getting results, and they're going to wait until it's the right time for them. What we do is LinkedIn is an amazing source of high quality leads. So if you're in the B2B space, you're most likely going to be using LinkedIn over Instagram, Pinterest, or TikTok as a primary source of high quality individuals. What you can do from that is you can send that traffic to pages which have pixels or the LinkedIn Insight tag, for example. So if you have a website or you've got a landing page for a case study or a webinar or someone to download your PDF or your ebook or your white paper, you can capture all of that really high quality information, and then you can retarget them instead of doing cold campaigns purely. And it's also a lot more cost effective. And retargeting is one layer of how you would set up campaigns. So you might have cold campaign, you might retarget people that engage with, I know, 10 plus seconds of that video that you've shown them. But LinkedIn is one section, and you can link that to multiple other platforms. So personally, and it's such a long way of saying what I use, but LinkedIn, I connect it with having a landing page like host on ClickFunnels, WordPress, whatever. And then I will have ActiveCampaign and like a Zapier webhook integration. And then I will export all of the new connections into a Google Sheet. So it's like a custom reroute through Zapier and an automation tool. I'll capture all that data, and then I can send like I can split them into lists. It's hard to do this without showing you like how it looks like. But I would split that traffic into different lists, and that will determine what campaigns I put them into, whether they've engaged with me before, have they already downloaded content, is it a completely cold lead? Do you want to send them some like video marketing material or some more stuff for free to put them in the top of your funnel? And that's the ways in which you can leverage tech, is to automate the multi-level approach. So you can set up this whole like web of touch points, and then have the right people in the right places to kind of follow through with that with a human element.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that.
Pleasure.
And then Tina, what would you say?
Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, technology is supposed to help us automate processes and workflows. And so imagine what you can do if you could forge relationships at scale and have these automation processes in place. And I think what any company can do right now is assess the team's processes and try to automate areas that take away from what the team should be doing, which is ultimately selling and building those relationships. And for those that already have these tools in place, just always continue to invest in training with your teams on the latest and greatest functionalities of these tools, because you invest so much time and effort and money into these tools. You really want to make sure that you're maximizing your investment. For example, I know at LinkedIn, we release new features and updates to Sales Navigator every quarter. So it's worth checking out to see if there are any courses or trainings that your teams can really do to maximize your investment in these technologies, if you already have them in place.
Awesome. That's a really good point.
Can I add
something on this topic that
as well?
Oh,
sorry.
Go ahead.
Just as she was talking, I was thinking of other stuff. So on top of that as well, it just completely escaped my mind. I had like a point. Yeah. So in terms of technologies and knowing when to invest and what to invest in, is just think about the return. So what Tina mentioned in terms of, okay, is this taking away from the needle moving activities or the North Star metric that this company is focusing on? If it is taking away from that, then you can replace it with tech or an automation tool. What I think about, like, for example, Sales Navigator, $80 a month. I'm going to think, okay, how much is a client worth to me? So what's the lifetime value of a client to me? If I can get one client every month, which is worth more than $80, which I'd hope it is, then that product is going to give me an ROI. Same with any other tech or software. If you just look at the price of that tech or that software and compare it to how much a client is worth to you, as long as you figure out what the return's going to be, you're minimizing the risk, and it takes away that fear of saying, am I ready to put in this amount of money every single month? If you're going to be making 5, even 2x the amount, it is worth it. So it's even just like looking at it, taking a step back and looking at the numbers from a logical perspective. Sorry to interrupt you though. I just like had that thought.
No, that's really important, and sometimes people don't think about it that way. Awesome. Okay, one thing that I thought just on this same topic is a lot of times we think about automation and personalization as kind of like contradicting each other. Like if we're going to introduce more automation, it comes at the expense of personalization. But with sales technology, that's really not the case. And I think that Snap is a really good example of that. Like if you're not familiar with Snap, like it's integration and outreach. And what it allows you to do is every time you look at a customer, like on your outreach dashboard, you see their LinkedIn profile. So without having to spend any extra time, you can have just the most up-to-date information, professional information that exists on that person, just right there without eating into any more of your time. So where you might have otherwise had to make a cold call blind, right? Now all of a sudden, for no extra time, you have that person in front of you. And so things like Snap, things like Outreach, they can automate certain parts of the process that would have otherwise sunk a lot of time for you, and allow you to automate away things that take the time, but allow you to leverage research and personalization more. So ironically, like, we are handling more scale, but it's because a lot of these technologies are automating away time-consuming non-sales activities. So you can actually get more scale and more personalization at the same time, which is pretty cool. It's making sales a lot more fun to be in, more sales activity. So cool. All right. So, okay, next one. So, best tips and tricks you're both seeing to be more effective for everyone. So, what are we missing too often in the way we've been doing business? Let's go with Natasha.
Best tips and tricks. Is this in general, like across sales as a whole, or anything specifically?
Totally open ended. Some tip or trick that someone can implement quickly.
Okay, this might be a little bit of a weird one. It's not, I'm just gonna roll with it. Is using humor, because a lot of the time I had this client last week and she was reaching out to Disney and she was like, okay, how do I reach out to this person? Because it's such a big company and it seems really intimidating. And a lot of like new SDRs, or if you're new to sales, like you're a new rep, when you see like a big organization or an important title, it's easy to get quite overwhelmed and a little bit nervous as to how you can reach out to that person. Everybody's human, like everybody is a human behind a screen. Like whether you're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company or you're the founder of a startup, you still like to laugh and have fun and have people who are going to treat you as a human being. What I like to use personally, what I encourage other people to use, is just because LinkedIn is a professional platform, you can still use humor. You can still, like, I've sent a GIF to somebody of like it's like a skeleton sitting in a chair, and it was like, I'm still waiting for a response because they hadn't got back to me. So I just use humor as like an extra touch point to follow up with people. And then instead of me being that salesperson who's like bugging them and saying, hey, I'm just bumping this to the top of your inbox, like respond to me, I'm trying to sell to you, I'm like, hey, I just want to be friends, like, can we have a chat? I know you're busy, but like, let me know when you see this and get back to me. And adding that laughter takes away a lot of the sales pressure, and that applies to everyone. So that's like a little thing, and use it like sparingly. Like, don't go too crazy with like memes and gifs to like really serious people. But yeah, something that's worked well for me.
Yeah, and partially it depends on the industry. Salespeople have a very high tolerance for goofiness, I've noticed. So like, depends kind of the industry or the persona that you're selling into, but humor can be really powerful. I mean, we do like our last email in the sequence. It's just like some dumb dad joke, and it works super well.
Dad jokes, honestly, like best. Like, they work really well.
I don't think they're particularly funny, but dude, they get responses, so I'm here for it. Okay, Hina, so going a little bit off script here, but you mentioned that there are new things kind of coming out all of the time. Mm-hmm. So I would be curious to hear from you, maybe some cool things in LinkedIn Sales Navigator that have come out in the last few months that maybe people don't know about yet, that have licenses to Sales Navigator, that are prospecting, that maybe they just don't know.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And so in the past few quarters, some of, at least my personal favorite, probably because I've worked on them, we do a lot of features that help prioritize and help manage your accounts. And so it goes back to the theme where, we're trying to help salespeople save time and better optimize their day-to-day workflow. And so a lot of features that we have launched recently are things like Account Map, where if you head to the account page on LinkedIn, you can actually start mapping out the account, where you can visually put leads onto a map and essentially help plan the account that way in a visual manner. And it's a really great way to kind of see, what relationships you already have, which ones you need to know, and build the account map off that. And so that's a really great feature that we just launched recently, and maybe some folks might not know about. The other really exciting set of features that I'm personally very excited about is the alerts, where we can surface critical insights at the right time for you in real time when you log into Sales Navigator. So going back to the example of, if you're selling financial solutions to finance CEOs or C executives or C-suites, and you notice that the company that you're trying to target is hiring like crazy in the finance department, we'll surface that information to you to let you know that this company is hiring and they're going through a surge. And so that's a really great alert to tell you, and maybe to infer that this is a great time to reach out with your offering. So we have a ton of different alerts coming, and that's just one of them that really think will be powerful for a salesperson's day-to-day workflow and process.
I love that, especially like good news.
Yeah.
This might just be me. I'm a sample size of one, but I never get tired of hearing congratulations for good news at our age. So, but that's really cool. You get instantly notified. I love it.
Yeah.
And then, okay, wait, one question about the account mapping is, okay, so you can do that within LinkedIn. Is there any way to share that with like maybe multiple people that are working on the same account, like an SDRAE pair?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question, and that's something that we've heard time and time again with from our customers' feedback calls. And so we can't do that right now, but we are thinking about how to build that out, that collaboration feature. And so that's something that we've heard time and time again. We want to share the map, and we want to collaborate with other teams. And so definitely on the roadmap. So be on the lookout. And actually, we'd love to talk to you offline about your experience and your use case, because it's something that's definitely top of mind for us as we start to build out account map more.
Cool. Right on. All right. So let's see. We're at 45. I got a couple more questions, and I want to leave it open to Q&A and do an Ask Me Anything for any of us. Let's do, okay. So as individuals, are there specific things that our roles could be doing to better help streamline our processes and get more out of time? I guess it's kind of an efficiency question. So like, are there things that we can do, things that are kind of easy to implement that will allow us to just free up more time in the day? Natasha, I'd be curious to hear kind of what your top tips are for this.
Yeah.
What are
Well,
some
you're
easy
talking to
areas?
talking to like an expert master procrastinator. Like I'm trying to move on to brighter futures. But I used to be so good at procrastinating and kind of jumping around from topic to topic, especially if you're somebody who's quite busy during the day. And like as things come up, maybe you get like a Slack notification or somebody asks you to do a different task, and then by the time you know it, like 7 hours have passed, you've not actually got the most important tasks done that you need to get done that day. What I do is prioritize, and I keep it really simple. So instead of having this long to-do list where you've got 30 things that you need to do, I'll pick, and I'll do this by like quarter, month, week, and day. For example, if I'm planning the day, the night before, plan out what your most important, like 2 to 3 max tasks are the following day. If that is reaching out to new prospects, if it's to send 10 voice notes, if it's to build out a couple use the account map feature to identify the kind of people that you want to reach out to within your accounts for that week. Pinpoint those priority tasks and segment time for them. This goes into like another tool that I use, which is good for people that maybe get distracted or a little bit like me. I use the Pomodoro technique. So you can literally Google Pomodoro timer, and you work in like 20-minute or like 25-minute blocks with a 5-minute break. How I work, and this might differ for other people, if you're somebody that likes to, you've got like a lot of kind of decision and like energy in the morning, segment like 2 to 3 hours for that really important work that isn't admin. Turn your phone off, focus on those 2 to 3 things, time block stuff out, get it done, and then the rest of the day you've got for those 5-minute tasks, admin, for like any calls and the rest of it. But it's about setting boundaries throughout your workday and creating like sacred time to just focus on those really important things that you have to get done. And the more you do it, the more you repeat it, you'll fall into that pattern or that rhythm, and it's going to not just benefit you, but it's also going to benefit other people and the rest of the team and the organization as well.
Love it. And then I want to ask kind of a similar question, but kind of for Tina, a similar question, but applied to teams and management. So are we able to do things better? And are these changes that we're making for the first time of remote work going to change back when we go back to in person? Here's your thoughts on that.
So I think now there's an even greater need to truly ensure your team is engaged and feels empowered while working remote. And so even for teams, there's a special balance between providing enough time to actually sell, and then time for tasks like training, team meetings, and admin tasks, like Natasha was mentioning. And I mentioned this before, but what I've seen that really moves the needle is just investing in your team with product training and education and knowledge so that everyone is up to speed with the latest and greatest so that everyone can work to their maximum potential. These sales tools that we mentioned are meant to help remove friction and increase productivity. So if you're feeling like the tools just aren't working for you, or if you find that you're not using them at all, maybe that's a sign for you to kind of look into trainings that you could take that could potentially help increase your productivity or efficiency, because the tools are really meant to do the opposite, right? Like the tools that we're providing or any other tool that's out there, its purpose is to really help alleviate pain points for you. And it's supposed to help alleviate your day to day. So I think something that teams can do just better at is really just take that time to really invest, not just in the tools, but also the education component and making sure that your processes are streamlined so that you can build those critical relationships as well.
All right, and then lastly, I want to talk tech a little bit. So there are a lot of successful people who make it work, kind of doing things the old-fashioned way. Actually, I'm not super experienced with this. I was having a conversation with our VP of sales, and he was telling me how it used to be back in the day. And yeah, I'm like an outreach native, so an outreach definitely invests in sales tech. So not an expert here, but we all know how important the raw talent is of people doing business. We're talking about the importance of earning trust, which automation can help set up, but we can't close on. I want to hear both of you talk about kind of the advantages of automation a little bit. I'm going to start with Natasha, and then we'll go to Tina, and then we'll open it up for a couple of questions.
So main thing that I think automation is really good for is adopting a data-driven approach, which I know I've said quite a few times today, but it enables you to track the statistics and look at the dashboard and see the reports of what's working and what isn't. I think that's something that you could do using just like human beings, like by themselves without tech, but it would take much more time. It would take a lot longer. There'd be way more moving parts. If you use automation in the correct way to set up a process which is more efficient, you can run multiple campaigns at the same time. You can split test, see what's working, see what isn't working, and have that in a centralized location. So you can have everybody who needs to see those reports and those numbers able to log in and see it at the same time. And that ties into kind of, I guess, communication, everybody being on the same page and being able to see the same things. So that would be like, yeah, I would say that's the main advantage. Second advantage of automation as well is that you don't have to use it to replace the entire flow of like engagement with a prospect. You can just choose to automate specific parts of your outreach that don't require as much personalization or human input, and that can actually help you be even more efficient and effective with getting in front of the right people and disqualifying the people that aren't a good fit. So I think that's the way in which we can use automation to our benefit instead of replacing human engagement completely.
All right, and Tina.
That's funny. You used to talk about how it used to be. I used to work with a salesperson that had a physical Rolodex where it was like, the cards, and he used to flip through looking through leads or people that he used to work with. And so I always think about that moment because I used to think like, imagine if you could have that Rolodex in an online list somewhere, just how much more effective you could be and how much more fast you can be. And just it's important to reiterate that technology should help scale what you're already doing and the things you're already doing really well and really help support your workflow. So no sales tool out there is really going to replace that human interaction and that personalization. And I think technology plays an active role in salespeople's workflows because there's only so many hours in a day. So if you can save half an hour, 2 hours a day with help of technology, that's just more time for you to really invest in those meaningful relationships that you're just trying to build. And I think areas where you can save time are things like surfacing critical insights across various sources, going back to like alerts that can help tell you when to kind of reach out. Even things like recording meetings so you don't have to take down notes or understanding who you're trying to reach out to before even doing so, things like that. There's a ton of opportunity with automation to help streamline those workflows and your day-to-day tasks.
Yeah, I love it. And I think part of it too is figuring out like where, kind of when you're reaching out to people, where personalization, where you get the biggest bang for your buck.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, for me, it's like the first email. If I can do personalization in the first part of the first email, I know that drives open rates, and that'll get people to see the value prop. And then all of a sudden, every time I make a call, I can reference that back. When I'm in outreach, I just click on the email. I can see that every time. So every time I'm making a call, if I have Snap, I can see some context on the person. I can always see what I wrote in that first email. And so you can leverage that personalization constantly by doing personalization in the right place and then getting it again without having to spend that extra time on the work.
I love that.
Um,
I love that technology really helps support your personal strategy. So it really, helps support anyone's personal custom outreach. So it's not a one size fits all, and that's what we love about technology is that it fits to your needs and is flexible to your needs as well.
Yeah. Well, it's very adaptable. And the thing is, okay, so I mentioned I was talking with our VP of sales about how it used to be back in the day. The thing that stood out the most to me is it was like, wow, sales was a lot of just like admin work. Like a lot of like back in the day, salespeople spent a huge percentage of their time doing non-sales activities. We're kind of take for granted that we have our Rolodex right here. We have things recorded for us. We have automation. We can see things at our fingertips. Back in the day, sales, a lot more time was spent on driving around or doing admin stuff. And so we're kind of living in a cool day. Cool. All right. Hey, any questions for me, Tina, or Natasha? Put them in the chat. I saw a couple. One, someone asked about the referral sequence. Sales Hacker put a great article about how referral selling saved the day. That's awesome. And the specific referral sequence I was talking about, if you Google 7 sequences every sales team needs, you can see the exact one that we used. I think we actually put the copy in there too, so you can totally copy us if you want. And okay, what is your favorite cadence sequence to make more meaningful connections with the buyer? Okay, I definitely have an opinion on this one. Cool. Do you guys have any thoughts? Actually, I'll start out. Oh, great. Sales Hacker went ahead and put it on. 7 sequences every sales team needs. My favorite 7 sequences are actually right in that article. So you can go there. One I really like. I mean, I'm a cold outbound guy. So like when I was at Outreach, it was pure cold outbound. And so we didn't really have inbound leads. And so my favorite sequence is just like straight up cold outbound for our target people. And the one that's worked really well is the Agoji sequence. And you can see that in the 7 sequences article. But it basically does what we're talking about, where you kind of do personalization up front at the beginning of the sequence, and then you can leverage that throughout the sequence. The whole purpose of it is basically to leverage that throughout the sequence so you can use that research without having to expend unnecessary time on it. I don't know, Natasha, if you spend much time on sequences. If you do, or ever give advice, I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know if that's your. I knew you to be leaders. So I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, no, I've tried out a couple different ways. Like my background was I did door-to-door sales, like B2B door-to-door. So initially I was kind of used to that cold approach, laws of average. How many people do I need to speak to that don't want to talk to me to make a certain amount of sales? When I first started the agency, it was similar to what you mentioned in terms of just cold calling. Like I was just trying to use charm and persistence and just laws of average to try and get people to chat to me and give me like a chance to have a meeting with them. And this was like in person, like a couple of years ago. How I've switched now, like a lot of my lead flow at the moment is inbound. It just comes from like posting content across like YouTube and LinkedIn. However, what I have done with a couple sales teams, which works really well, is instead of having pure cold calling, is kind of making that call warm. So using like tech, for example, if you've got outreach and you can see the notes on that prospect or that account before you pick up the phone, having a touch point with, I mean, it could be one or it could be multiple people within the buyer circle. So if you've used like the account map feature and you can see, okay, there's like 5 different decision makers that I need to get in front of, or my team needs to kind of connect with and have a conversation with. Having a couple touch points with those people and then picking up the phone makes that call warm, which means it's more likely that they're going to know, oh, I actually do know who you are. Like I recognize your name. And I'm like, yeah, well, I left a couple comments like on this post that you spoke about XYZ. And immediately it kind of takes down that, I guess, that barrier to trust, because when you cold call, a lot of people are like wall up, like, what do you want? I don't trust you. Who are you? So warm calling can be something that you can adopt really well. And then another thing that I like to do is I have this, it's called like the ECCC method, where you basically engage before you request to connect with somebody. So before I'll even send a connection request, I'll go and leave insightful and like valuable comments on their posts for like a couple days or a week. And then I'll reach out and I'll provide value. And then from that point, I'll kind of guide the conversation towards a more sales direction. So yeah, they're like the two things that I like to do, like warm calling or just multiple touch points before I even go out with like a sales approach.
Love it. And actually, I love what you mentioned about like engaging with their posts or liking their posts. Liking people's posts is one of the easiest things you can do to make people like you.
Yeah.
I get a lot, like when I post, I
Literally.
get lots of reactions. But guess what? Even if I get 500 reactions on a post, I know the people that are consistently liking my posts.
Yeah.
Like I'll run into someone and say, I know you from somewhere. I know I like you, but I'm not sure exactly what it is. So really great piece of advice. Okay, your job, your homework for this is you should follow Tina and Natasha on LinkedIn. I am, and I recommend that all of you do as well. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining today. I learned a lot of great things. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Have a great rest of your day.